Welcome back to another chilling episode of True Crime Untold Cases. I'm your host, and today we're traveling back to 1970s Norway, where a disturbing discovery in a valley known ominously as Death Valley would launch one of the Cold War's most baffling mysteries. Two young hikers stumbled upon a badly burned body of a woman, but this was no ordinary death. Her fingerprints were deliberately sanded away, every label meticulously cut from her clothing, and a trail of fake identities led investigators down a rabbit hole of international intrigue. Hotel staff recalled a mysterious woman speaking multiple languages, constantly changing rooms, and writing in code. Was she a spy caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse, or something else entirely? Join me as we unravel the haunting mystery of the Isdal woman and the dark secrets she took to her grave. Let's begin. On a cold November afternoon in 1970, two young girls were hiking through Norway's Isdal Valley, a remote area known locally as Death Valley due to its history of suicides and tragic accidents. As they made their way through the rugged terrain, they stumbled upon something that would launch one of Norway's most enduring mysteries: the charred remains of a woman's body, positioned in a peculiar way among the rocks. The scene was disturbing, to say the least. The woman lay on her back, her hands raised in what appeared to be a defensive position. Her body was badly burned, but investigators would soon discover this was just the beginning of a complex web of mysteries surrounding her death. Around her body, they found a dozen pink phenobarbital sleeping pills, two empty bottles that had contained flammable liquid, and a partially melted plastic passport holder. What made this discovery particularly strange was the complete lack of identifying information. No passport, no ID, nothing that could immediately tell investigators who this woman was. But as they began to process the scene, they realized this wasn't a simple case of someone wandering into the valley to end their life. This had all the hallmarks of something far more sinister. The autopsy revealed that the woman had died from a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning and burns, with traces of at least 50 sleeping pills in her system. But it was what they didn't find that was most intriguing. Her fingerprints had been systematically sanded away, a deliberate act that spoke of careful planning and a desire to hide her true identity. The investigation took an even stranger turn when police examined her clothing. Every label, every manufacturer's tag had been meticulously cut out. The only items that remained intact were her jewelry and a few personal belongings, including an umbrella and some rubber boots. These items would later become crucial pieces of the puzzle as investigators tried to trace her movements. Working with what little they had, Norwegian police launched an extensive investigation. They created a composite sketch of the woman and distributed it widely. She was described as being around 30-40 years old, with small brown eyes, long dark hair, and small ears. She stood about 5'4" tall and had what witnesses would later describe as an elegant appearance. The breakthrough came when investigators began checking local hotels. They discovered that the mysterious woman had stayed at various hotels in Bergen, Norway's second largest city, in the weeks leading up to her death. But here's where things got even more interesting. She had registered under at least 8 different names, including Fenella Lork and Claudia Tielt. At each hotel, she requested to change rooms shortly after checking in, often asking for rooms with balconies or views of the street below. Hotel staff remembered her clearly. She was well-dressed, sophisticated, and spoke multiple languages fluently, including English, German, French, and Dutch. She would often pay in cash and seemed to have no shortage of money. But what really caught their attention was her behavior. She was constantly on guard, always seeming to look over her shoulder, and would frequently change her appearance by wearing different wigs. One hotel porter recalled how she would sit in the hotel restaurant, writing in a notebook using what appeared to be some kind of code. When she noticed him watching, she quickly packed up her things and left. Another staff member remembered her asking detailed questions about local boat schedules and showing an unusual interest in the fish export industry. As investigators dug deeper, they found that the woman had travelled extensively throughout Norway in the weeks before her death. She had visited several small towns along the western coast, always staying in tourist hotels and always using different aliases. But why? What was she doing in these remote locations? The contents of her suitcases, found in a railway station locker in Bergen, only added to the mystery. They contained clothing with no labels, multiple pairs of glasses with non-prescription lenses, several wigs, and makeup that suggested she was skilled at disguising her appearance. There were also maps, schedules, and notebooks filled with seemingly random numbers and letters that no one could decipher. Perhaps most intriguingly, investigators found that she had travelled to Norway from Paris, but her movements before that were harder to trace. They discovered she had been to several other European countries, including Belgium, Switzerland, and Germany, always using different identities and always staying in upscale hotels. The timing and location of her activities raised serious questions. This was 1970, at the height of the Cold War, and Norway's western coast was of significant strategic importance. The country's fishing industry was known to be a cover for intelligence gathering operations, and several NATO installations were located in the region. Was she a spy? If so, who was she working for? The police also found several gold coins and a significant amount of German and Belgian currency in her possession. This, combined with her sophisticated appearance and knowledge of languages, suggested she was well-funded and well-educated. But it also raised more questions. Was she involved in some sort of illegal trading operation? Was she being pursued by someone? Or was she the one doing the pursuing? As news of the case spread, witnesses began coming forward with their own encounters with the mysterious woman. A shoe store owner in Bergen remembered her buying rubber boots similar to those found at the death scene. He recalled her speaking English with what he thought was an accent from southern Europe. A local fisherman claimed to have seen her hiking in the Isdal Valley 2 days before her body was discovered, accompanied by 2 men in dark coats. These sightings painted a picture of a woman who was constantly on the move, always watching and being watched. But they didn't bring investigators any closer to understanding who she really was, or why she met such a violent end in that remote valley. The manner of her death suggested both suicide and murder. The sleeping pills and flammable liquid pointed to a planned death. But the defensive position of her body and the systematic removal of identifying features hinted at something more sinister. The investigation continued to expand, reaching out to international police agencies and intelligence services. The woman's dental work suggested she might have been from Eastern Europe, but attempts to match her dental records with missing persons cases across Europe proved fruitless. Her fingerprints, though partially destroyed, were run through every available database, but no matches were found. As the investigation stretched into 1971, Norwegian authorities found themselves facing mounting pressure to solve the case. The international media had latched onto the story, dubbing her the Isdal woman, and speculation about her true identity and purpose in Norway ran rampant. The Cold War context of the time only fueled these theories, with many believing she was caught up in an international espionage operation gone wrong. One of the most compelling leads came from a taxi driver who claimed to have driven the woman shortly before her death. According to his account, she had seemed agitated and spoken German, mentioning something about meeting someone. The driver recalled dropping her off near a train station, but when police checked surveillance footage from the area, they found that several key tapes from that time period were mysteriously missing. The investigation also revealed that the woman had made several phone calls to foreign numbers during her stays at various hotels. When traced, these numbers led to disconnected lines or businesses that claimed no knowledge of her. One number, however, connected to a private residence in Rome, but the occupants had moved away just days after the woman's death, leaving no forwarding address. Further analysis of her belongings yielded more puzzling details. The notebooks found in her suitcase contained what appeared to be a sophisticated coding system. Cryptographers brought in to examine the writings noticed patterns that resembled surveillance notes, detailed observations about industrial facilities, shipping movements, and military installations along Norway's coast. But if these were indeed spy notes, they were encoded in a way that defied conventional decryption methods. The woman's clothing, despite having their labels removed, was traced to boutiques in Italy and France. Several pieces were custom-made, suggesting she had significant financial means. The stitching patterns and materials used indicated that some items had been altered to include hidden pockets, a common technique used by intelligence operatives to conceal documents or microfilm. Perhaps most intriguing was the discovery of trace elements of rare earth metals on some of her belongings. These elements were crucial components in emerging technologies of the time, particularly in military applications. Norway was one of the few Western nations with significant deposits of these materials, and there had been ongoing intelligence operations related to their mining and transportation. Witnesses continued to come forward with new details. A railway worker remembered seeing her at Bergen Station, engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument with a man in a black coat. The man spoke to her in a language the worker didn't recognize, but their body language suggested a confrontational relationship. When shown photographs of known intelligence operatives from various agencies, the worker couldn't make a positive identification. Hotel records revealed another curious pattern. In each city she visited, she would check into a hotel room, then request a change to a different room within hours. Security experts noted this as classic counter-surveillance behavior, a technique used to detect and evade potential followers. Even more telling was her habit of paying for multiple rooms in different hotels simultaneously, creating confusion about her actual location. The investigation took an unexpected turn when a former Norwegian intelligence officer, speaking on condition of anonymity, suggested that several Western intelligence agencies had been monitoring a female operative matching the Isdal woman's description. This operative was believed to be gathering information about Norway's nuclear energy program and military installations. However, the officer stopped short of confirming whether she was working for or against Western interests. Analysis of her dental work provided another tantalizing clue. The distinctive gold work and technique used suggested the procedures had been performed in Eastern Europe, possibly East Germany or Czechoslovakia. However, attempts to trace specific dental records hit a wall of bureaucracy and Cold War security measures. A breakthrough seemed imminent when investigators discovered a pattern in her hotel registrations. The aliases she used appeared to follow a code. Each new name maintained certain letter combinations while changing others in a systematic way. This suggested she was working within a structured system, possibly reporting to handlers who needed to track her movements without revealing her true identity. The investigation also uncovered evidence that she had visited several research facilities and military installations across Norway, always maintaining a cover story as a traveling saleswoman or tourist. In each location, she had made contact with individuals who had access to sensitive information, though none would admit to sharing anything of significance with her. As winter settled over Bergen in 1971, the case took another dark turn. Two witnesses who had provided key testimony about seeing the woman in her final days suddenly recanted their statements, claiming they had been mistaken. When pressed, they appeared nervous and refused to elaborate on their sudden change of heart. The woman's personal effects revealed one final mystery: a small key found hidden in the lining of her suitcase. The key's unique design matched safety deposit boxes used by a Swiss bank, but by the time investigators traced this lead, The box in question had been emptied, its contents removed by someone using proper documentation just days after the woman's death. The timing of her death also coincided with increased NATO activity along Norway's coast, including classified submarine movements and military exercises. Several intelligence analysts suggested that her death might have been connected to these operations, either as a security measure or as a result of a failed mission. As the investigation moved into its second year, Norwegian authorities found themselves facing increasing pressure from both domestic and international sources. Several foreign intelligence agencies, while officially denying any knowledge of the Isdal woman, began making discreet inquiries about specific aspects of the case. This heightened international interest only served to reinforce suspicions about her possible connections to espionage. A significant development came when a retired Belgian diplomat came forward with information about a woman matching her description who had attended several high-level European economic conferences in the late 1960s. According to his account, she had demonstrated detailed knowledge of international trade policies, particularly those involving strategic materials. However, when pressed for more specific details, the diplomat became evasive, suggesting he had been warned not to speak further about the matter. The investigation took another intriguing turn when analysis of her handwriting revealed characteristics consistent with training in Eastern European schools. Graphologists noted distinctive patterns that suggested she had learned to write in one alphabet system before adapting to another, a common trait among people who had moved between Cyrillic and Latin writing systems. This seemed to support theories about her potential origins behind the Iron Curtain. More witnesses emerged with accounts of the woman's final days. A shopkeeper in Bergen recalled her purchasing supplies that would later be found at the death scene, including the bottles that had contained flammable liquid. The shopkeeper remembered her as being unusually focused on the labels of these items, checking their composition carefully. Was she planning her own death, or was she being coerced? The investigation also uncovered a pattern in her movements that suggested she was following a predetermined schedule. Her hotel stays, while appearing random at first glance, showed a systematic progression along Norway's coastline, with each stop corresponding to locations of strategic interest. She had visited ports handling military shipments, areas near radar installations, and regions known for advanced research facilities. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that several other unidentified bodies had been found in various European countries during the same period, all sharing similar characteristics: missing labels, altered fingerprints, and connections to sensitive industrial or military locations. While none could be directly linked to the Isdal woman, the pattern was too striking to ignore. The woman's last known movements became clearer as investigators pieced together witness accounts from her final days. She had been seen entering a cafe near the Bergen train station, where she spent several hours writing in her notebook. The cafe owner remembered her repeatedly checking her watch and glancing at the door, as if waiting for someone who never arrived. A breakthrough in the case came when a former Eastern European intelligence officer, now living in the West, reviewed the case files. While he couldn't identify the woman, he recognized certain patterns in her behavior and coding systems that matched those used by a specific intelligence network operating out of Czechoslovakia. However, before he could provide more detailed information, he withdrew from the investigation, citing concerns for his safety. The investigation also revealed that several pages had been torn from her notebook shortly before her death. The indentations left on the underlying pages, when analyzed with modern forensic techniques, suggested she had been writing a series of numbers and coordinates. These coordinates, when plotted, corresponded to various NATO facilities along the Norwegian coast. Another crucial piece of evidence emerged when investigators re-examined her clothing using more advanced techniques. Trace elements found on her clothes matched industrial compounds used in specialized military equipment manufacturing. More specifically, these compounds were consistent with those used in submarine detection systems being developed by NATO at the time. The woman's movements also coincided with several significant intelligence operations known to have been active in Norway during that period. Multiple witnesses reported seeing her in conversations with individuals later identified as having connections to various intelligence services, both Eastern and Western. As the investigation continued, it became increasingly clear that powerful forces were working to keep certain aspects of the case hidden. Files went missing, witnesses changed their stories, and promising leads suddenly went cold. This pattern of interference suggested that multiple intelligence agencies might have had a stake in maintaining the mystery of the Isdal woman. One of the most compelling theories to emerge was that she had been a double agent whose position had become untenable. The evidence suggested she had been gathering information for one side while potentially feeding disinformation to another. This dangerous game might have ultimately led to her demise when her true allegiance was discovered. The investigation also uncovered evidence that she had maintained multiple bank accounts across Europe, each under different aliases but following a similar pattern in how they were established and maintained. The accounts had been emptied within days of her death, suggesting someone had access to her financial network and knew of her fate before it became public knowledge. As the case files grew thicker, the mystery of the Isdal woman became emblematic of the shadowy world of Cold War espionage. Her death represented the human cost of international intelligence operations, a life lived in shadows, ended in mystery, and buried in secrets. The true nature of her work, her real identity, and the circumstances of her death remained carefully guarded secrets, protected by the very agencies she may have served or opposed. Decades later, the case continues to intrigue investigators and researchers. Modern forensic techniques have revealed new details about her life and death, but the core mystery remains. Was she a victim of Cold War politics, a spy who knew too much, or someone caught in the crossfire of international espionage? The answers may lie in still classified files, waiting to be revealed when the full story of Cold War intelligence operations finally comes to light. The legacy of the Isdal woman serves as a reminder of an era when international tensions and espionage transformed ordinary locations into battlegrounds of intelligence and counterintelligence. Her story continues to fascinate and perplex, a testament to the complex web of international relations and the human cost of covert operations during one of history's most volatile periods,